In 2005, Ardashes Kassakhian ran for the open Glendale City Clerk seat with the explicit goal of making elections in Glendale more transparent, accessible, and secure. He was the youngest person ever elected to a Glendale municipal post in the city's history. In 2020, Kassakhian ran for council, becoming the first city clerk to be elected to Glendale City Council. And as of April 2022, it became his turn to take the reins as the mayor for the City of Glendale. We spoke with Mr. Kassakhian just before he was appointed mayor to discuss the challenges of the Armenian community and the importance of activism. From ANCA Western Region Director to Glendale Mayor, Ardashes has been representing and fighting for the Armenian-American community for quite some time, and we were honored to hear his story and to share his experiences and wisdom with all of you. You are listening to Haituk Talks, the official podcast of the AYF West. I'm Haig Minasian.
And I'm Susanna Abrahamian.
And we're just a couple of Armenians
talking in the world.
A couple of Armenians talking in the world.
Welcome, Ardashes. I know a lot of people, call you Ardy, or that's what maybe your online persona, not persona. I'm gonna start all over.
Just don't call me Kardashian.
Ardashes, Kardash. No, but so if you don't mind, I'm gonna call you Ardashes. It's a beautiful name. Dope
Thank
name.
you.
It is such a beautiful name, and it's an Armenian historic name. Actually, it was the name of the king of Metzhaik.
Yep.
So it's very much understandable.
Ardashes Kassakhian. That's why my parents. So when I grew up back east, I was born in Boston. I went to my kindergarten in New Jersey, and first day of kindergarten in most American schools. Back then, you would go and they would have your name written on this tag with a piece of yarn. You'd wear it around your neck, and everyone had like a very cute, short, Hamegatsi name, like John Smith or whatever. And I had Ardashes Kassakhian, which weighed me down, Vizes Gachvads.
Your parents did well, though.
Well, when I came home, I was upset about it. Yeah. I was like, why did you guys give me such a difficult name? And my parents said, and I said that I remember this. I remember this conversation clearly. They explained to me, they said, look, you're growing up in the United States. We can't, tell you who you're going to marry, where you'll live. But the one thing your parents give you that you carry with you wherever you go in this world that will remind you of who you are and where you've come from is your name.
That's amazing. I've actually had the same exact thought. The only thing you can control in that situation is their name. Yeah. And I genuinely believe you kind of... the name is very symbolic as to maybe something you want to aspire to or you think about regularly. So
absolutely.
You cannot escape the fact that your name is Ardashes or Haik.
And my parents explained to me who Ardashes was. They're like, you are named after Ardashes Kassakhian, who made sure everyone spoke Armenian or he cut out their tongue, and very gruesome stuff for a 5-year-old to absorb. But I think that was the moment when I became this walking vessel of Armenian trivia and knowledge. So the next day, if anyone ever made fun of my name on this playground in American schools, I'd be like, well, you know who Armenians are? Noah's Ark, man, and you wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for the Armenian people. And you become this amateur lecturer.
Well, you have to. Again, I probably went through the same thing. Just trying to, because you have to explain everything, and then you get to tie it into the Armenian genocide and explain all that. So. Yeah. Well, anyways, thanks again I'm really glad you're here, Ardashes. Sure. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you. You guys are doing good work.
No, of course, you too. And speaking of which, I actually wanted to start this talk with, your first election. Now, was your first public election city clerk for...
It was actually my first public election was in middle school.
Oh, nice.
Running for, and that's not to say that I was a politically hungry, power hungry kid from a young age.
Destined at a young
age. People will say, "Oh, you're a politician." I always correct them and say I'm a public servant. Mm-hmm. My parents have both been educators and scientists. They're environmental chemists. My mom taught chemistry. Nice. Some of your listeners, I don't know, may or may not. She taught for many years in Glendale, so a lot of folks went to Hoover or Clark Magnet. Had her for chemistry and AP chemistry. And, they always taught us kind of what's that line in Spider-Man, Uncle Ben says, to those to whom, to those who have great power, much is expected, or you have to those who much is given, much is expected in return. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the philosophy, to always volunteer and, participate. So I didn't think of it as being a student leader as much as I thought of being a student servant. I ran for office and I lost my first election pretty resoundingly. Then my friends convinced me to run again. And I remember I got up on stage, and, back then, the way non-Armenians pronounce my name, because I always made everyone call me by my full name.
Nice.
So they called me Ardashes. So they announced the office I was running for, and this was in like 1990, 1991. So it was right when you had this influx of immigrants from Armenia. And there was this interesting dynamic in Glendale where you had a lot of Hayastansis who had come post-earthquake, post-Soviet collapse. And, they would be called all sorts of terrible names and epithets like Fauber, fresh off the boat, or whatever.
Oh, I've been there.
And so I'm up on this stage. It's like 7th or 8th grade. And Mr. Kohlmeyer, who was the ASB, whatever, rep, said, and for this office, first candidate is Ardashes Kassakhian, right? And then out of the darkness, I can't see anyone in the audience because the stage is flooded with lights. I hear someone say, "Apet Haya," right? And all of a sudden, there's this roar of applause from this contingent.
Well, because you just moved to LA at that point, probably a few years before, right?
I'd been in LA since probably 5 years before.
Before that, you guys were in Boston, correct?
Well, born in Boston, lived in New Jersey, lived in Canada for a while, lived in Hayastan for 2 years.
Oh, no way.
As a child.
Really?
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's awesome, though, that Apet Haya, that's so funny. You'll never forget it.
So Armenians have been backing me in my elections since middle school.
That's beautiful. That's what we like to see.
And I still have a lot of friends, some who work in the city who've known me from middle school and remember those days. That many of them have gone on to do great things in all sorts of fields, in medicine and science and education. Awesome. But it was a very difficult time for them, and I think that's at that moment and in middle school, I saw myself as a bridge between the American culture and those who were trying to fit into that.
That's great.
And find their place.
So I do want to ask maybe your post-university, your first election as well, but I did want to actually ask, when I was applying to jobs, I remember thinking, is Haig too, random of a name? Because I live in Orange County, they don't know Haigs. I mean, and you do have Ardy as, something easier for people to say, but, what would be your opinion on, whitewashing ourselves to win an election or to, be, to get that job? I'm not sure if it actually makes a difference, if maybe it's just something we're thinking of in our heads.
So I don't have an answer to that, right? I remember when I would consider it or I would talk about it, I don't know, for whatever reason, as a child in my naivete, I was always drawn to the name Arthur because it was it started like Ardashes, but it was still a kingly or royal name, but it's so much more common. But, I had one kid, Vietnamese kid who was a couple of years older than me in high school. We had geometry class, and his name was Francois Nguyen. And he's like, why do you not like Ardashes? He's like, when people say John, you have to say which John. When people say,
and
Fred, you have to explain which Fred it is. There's no other Ardashes in this school. You're the only Ardashes. That's great. So that was one thing that kind of always stuck with me.
I used to say the same thing.
But it is difficult. I will tell you, if you were to do an experiment and put a name like Ardashes Kassakhian on a job resume and put Jack Smith or Jack John, whatever, on a resume and send them out. I think that not just for Armenians, of course, this has been proven with African Americans who have different non-anglicized names, or even Asians who often shorten or adapt Americanized names. There is something for that. So, I mean, I'm not here to judge anyone. There's certainly a whole generation of Armenians that came in the century before, especially to Fresno, who shortened their name, like Shakarian shortened their name to Sweet, or whatever, and you have stories like that. If you're
different times, different things. Also, now it's a little bit more of an accepting space for diversity and this and that. So
I mean, it arose by any other name, right?
Yeah.
Maintain your essence, call yourself whatever you want. I mean, Hayagan Hayanunov or Zibilen, they're pure ach.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there are people who have Americanized names who are probably doing more things for anyone than anyone else.
I agree.
I prefer Ardashes, so I appreciate you guys calling me Ardashes.
No, I love it, and I mean everyone does have their quote unquote white name, but I've been very happy to see that Ardashes is you're loud and proud. So
definitely.
Yeah. But I did want to ask you about then, let's say your first
real campaign.
It was city.
I know what you meant. Yeah, it was my first real campaign was city clerk. I mean, my first public campaign where I ran for a public office where people went to polling places and voted was for city clerk. And the reason I ran for city clerk was because, that was in 2005. And going back to about 6 years before that, in 1999, there was an election in Glendale. There was a candidate. At that time, there was about 70,000 Armenians living in Glendale, but only less than 1,000 voted in elections.
Damn.
Wow.
Yeah. And, there was this candidate named Rafi Manukyan. He was a CPA. No one had really heard of him outside of ANC circles because he was involved in Glendale High Todd. And he decided to run for city council. Now, at the time, there was Larry Zarian who was on the council. But Zarian, who's now passed on, he's dead. But he was the first Armenian elected official on Glendale City Council, but he hadn't gotten elected with Armenian votes. He got elected by appealing to
general public.
And he actually, I think someone even told me that his name, which I always thought was Zarian, was his name. Someone said no, it's Lazarian, and he shortened it to Zarian. Right? So I'd be interested to know more about it. I have to ask his sons who are still alive and around. So, anyways, Rafi Manukyan jumps in a race. And no one gives him a chance. The Glendale News Press, which was an independently owned newspaper that covered all things Glendale, said that he was going to finish near dead last out of 13 candidates. And there was a reason for it. They didn't think they didn't think non-Armenians would vote for him, and they didn't think Armenians were going to turn out to vote for him. So at that time, we started registering Armenian voters because we saw Adrian Nazarian, who's in the state assembly now, was one of the organizers. He had spent quite a bit of time in politics. We had been at UCLA together. He was a year ahead of me. He had gone to go work for Congressman Brad Sherman and had worked on various campaigns. He had done this program called Coro. And he said, look, we have the votes, but they're not registered. So we got to make sure that they get registered. And at the time, this community was very skeptical. Armenians are still generally skeptical, but even more so back then, of participating in American politics. The voting material was not in Armenian, so you're asking them to sign things that they don't understand that are official documents, which is already sus. So, and we translated the materials. We first of all went to the city and we said, look, we need these materials in Armenian. And they said, well, you guys are considered Caucasian and white, so we're not going to translate. It's too expensive and, tough luck, go pound sand. So Rafi Manukyan says that was a moment when I turned to him and supposedly said, I'm going to have that person's job one day, who was the city clerk.
Wow.
And I don't remember it as quite like that, but
but there you go.
I guess that's like Steve Jobs' origin story. So years later, when that position became open, I ran for that position because I believe that elections are the number one way how Americans can get involved in the democratic process.
Right.
We have a responsibility here in this country to be engaged, and I wanted to make sure that everyone, Armenian or otherwise, who lives in this city, pays taxes, who has the right to vote, at least understands what they're voting on.
Yeah.
And so I ran. I was 27, I think, when I started the campaign. I was 28 when I officially got elected, and I think I was the youngest person elected to public office in Glendale. I don't know if anyone has verified that, but I hope that record is broken by someone soon.
Someone Armenian.
Were you
impressive.
Were you nervous? Not nervous, but were you confident? This is in the bag, or
not at all?
Why not? Let's
not
give it a
at
shot,
all.
kind of thing, right?
Not at all. Not at all. Because we had run so many successful campaigns. By that point, we had Armenians on the school board, on a college board. We kind of had hit a rhythm, so we knew that we got to. We came up with this phrase with Rafi Hamparian at the ANC, the educate, motivate, activate, came kind of out of this movement, right? You first educate people as to why they need to vote. You motivate them as to why it's important for them to participate, and then you activate them. You give them something actionable to do. And once we had hit that, we knew that rhythm. We knew we were solid. We knew we could win most campaigns. Yeah. And to this day, I think fundamentally, and I don't want this to come across as bragging, but I can, having been exposed to it, having looked at races, you develop kind of the sixth sense as to what will work and what doesn't work. It's like anything. I think there is a couple of Malcolm Gladwell podcasts and essays on that. You do something enough times, you develop kind of an expertise. And
the 10,000 hours thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sure. Just like you guys are awesome at doing this podcast, right?
Thank you.
So, we had that confidence, but we also had this concern. I've always had. You always have to run like you're going to lose.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. People say that and they don't know what that means, but I think that fear is a great motivator. maybe fear is not that word, but you know that feeling that you get like the night before your 15-page essay is due and you've only written half a paragraph?
Yeah.
And yeah, the procrastinator.
The pressure, it can like, potentially create a diamond there. I mean, it could do good.
But I will say this, that even now, even today, after having been in office for as long as I have, or served as long as I have and been involved in politics, I mean, I can never seem to get rid of the imposter syndrome.
Wow.
Like, I sometimes there are mornings I'll wake up and I'll be like, what is going on? Who am I? Why am I here? Because I think that's also healthy. I look at that as something that gives me strength, because I'm always trying to learn something new every day and improve and learn something from everyone I meet. I'm sure
it won't be your last election too. And Susanna,
hope not.
I was talking to Susanna earlier. I mean, she's interested in this stuff too. You're like, maybe you would run for office one of these days, right? I mean,
that would be awesome. We need more women in office.
Hopefully, the thing is, I'm in medicine. I'm an aspiring physician, but at UCI I did international relations, and my goal was, I was hoping that in the future I can further my education in international relation and international law. And I was hoping maybe I can work for an intergovernmental organization where I could advocate for Armenian causes, but we will have to see how that goes. And I actually wanted to ask you, what started your interest in politics? You started running for office in middle school, but what made you decide that, I want to run for an office for a city?
So, as far as how I knew, it wasn't as much as you don't wake up one day. So I get people to come and ask me, they say, well, I want to run for office, or how do I get to run for office, or what do you do? And I give everyone this answer, that if your goal is to run for office, you probably should not be in politics. Your goal should be to effectuate and impact and make actual change in this world. If you can find the issue that you're most passionate about and work on that, and if it intersects with the opportunities to run for office, which, there you will find times when it will, then you'll find yourself on the similar path as I did. Yeah. What got me involved in politics and what got me interested, first of all, as Armenians, I don't think there is an Armenian in the world. We also say we hate politics. What it is Armenians hate partisan politics, but Armenians are political animals by nature.
Yeah, we are. We all have an opinion, first of all.
Yeah, and just where Armenia is situated, where we have diasporan communities, you can't help but be interested in what's happening in the world and what affects what, and what's happening in either the Ukraine or Syria. I mean, it impacts Armenians everywhere, right? So by nature, we're political animals, and we are definitely opinionated.
Yes.
But we shy away from engaging in other areas of politics, and we can get into that later. But for me, the most important thing was participation. Having grown up in this country, in a democratic system of government. That's what ended up happening. I mean, there's kind of this, I'll bounce around a little bit, but I was at UCLA. I was a history major.
Nice.
Prior to that, actually, I was a chemistry major because I was Armenian, and I was, if I was going to find myself a wife, I had to be either pre-law or pre-med. So those were the only career options that my parents had made available to me, and I decided I would go maybe pre-pharmacy. I don't know. I got into UCLA as a chemistry major, and I quickly realized I don't like chemistry.
You're braver than I am. I wanted to do the history thing. I went business because they were like, you got to do business at least.
I don't know. In hindsight, I don't know if my parents. I went totally rogue. I was like, I like history. I took an Armenian history. It was funny. There was this catalog. We used to have these printed catalogs for classes. And I saw Armenian history being offered in it, and I was so excited.
That's so cool.
So I went to my dad, and I was like, look, they're teaching Armenian history at UCLA. Isn't that cool? And my dad looked at it, and he's like, that's Richard Hovhannisyan who's teaching that class. He's the foremost person in Armenian history. He's someone that we've known from our days in Boston when he would come and give lectures. And looked at me, and he's like, you will take that class.
Yeah.
He's like, and if you don't get an A, don't bother coming home. And I was like, but why? He's like, look, he goes, take that class because you didn't get a chance to go to an Armenian school. We didn't send you to an Armenian private school. I went to public school my whole life, and he said, college is your time to learn and expand your horizons, and this is going to be your opportunity to learn about your people's history. You may never get another opportunity like this again.
At an advanced level, we go to Armenian school, I mean, we get the basics. So you could look up on Wikipedia, going and learning in Richard's class. I mean, I'm very jealous.
It was a solid experience because you learn a lot, and you learn that our history is, what we are taught as children is steeped in mythology, right? Like 10-foot tall Sasunsi Davids shooting lightning bolts out of their eyes at our enemies. And then you get into the actual history and you're like, no, this is a really crappy history. Like we are professionals at stabbing each other in the back and just making the absolute wrong decision. And the fact that we've survived this long is an absolute miracle. It's a goddamn miracle.
I say because we're not united at all. That's why we survived.
Absolutely, the decentralization.
They can't get us all together in one place.
100%. 100%. That is facts. That is facts. So I took the history class, and then I got more involved in Armenian things there. I kind of went through this personal cultural awakening. I'm getting to a point, Sudan, don't worry.
Don't worry.
What ends up happening is my second senior year at UCLA, I took the scenic route out of college. I find out that the Turkish Republic is establishing this chair of Turkish studies.
We wanted to ask you about that.
So that's how that leads, my activism in trying to raise awareness and put a stop to the university entering into that relationship leads me to an internship in Washington, D.C. When I get to Washington, D.C., I see that there are not a lot of Armenians involved in politics. In the nation's capital, and by the nation's capital, in arguably the world's most powerful nation's capital, right? So then you come back to Glendale after being exposed to that. It's almost like coming out of the cave and, seeing the light, and then you're forced back into the cave. I don't want to call Glendale a cave. I love Glendale. But then you come back and you see people playing tavlu in the parks or, nardi and wringing their hands and complaining about politics. And you're like, well, how can you complain if you're not even participating in the decision-making process? Everyone is in D.C. Every community, every group has their representatives, has their young soldiers marching in the halls of Congress as interns. There's a reason why, Latinos, Jewish Americans, African Americans are able to have more of a voice. I mean, they still have challenges themselves to overcome, but they have more of a voice than you do because you're not even on the playing field. So don't even complain about the rules of the game. So
this is what, mid 2000s?
This was actually 2000.
Because a lot has changed now. Both Armenian-American Assembly and ANCA are working on this.
No, they do great work, and I mean, we have a lot of congressmen that we're very good friends with now.
Yeah,
I mean,
and we've had a lot back then too, and I would actually say that we had more friends back then.
Oh, really?
We've kind of slacked in that regard, not for lack of work, but we have great challenges as a community, and for every success we have, for every innovation we develop, we have to realize that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction from some of the adversaries that we have, whether it's the oil lobby or Turkish or Azeri interests or pro-Israel interests that don't align with Armenian interests, because we also have many friends in Israel.
Nice.
Well, so I think it's cool that it was this, not just the Armenian class, but this Armenian issue, let's say it happened at school or with the Turkish trying to start a program?
It was the Republic of Turkey was going to donate $1.5 million. If you can imagine the irony and the Yiddish word is chutzpah, or
they did it on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. $1.5 million to UCLA to establish a chair of modern Turkish or Ottoman Turkish studies.
And you stopped, and you guys were successful in stopping that, the ASA.
Yeah, we were. It was It was probably my first taste of real activism.
That's cool.
And it wasn't planned. I think that year our ASA was more interested in the Big Bear trip and
still is.
The Dashtush and who's going to bring the meat, and was it going to be from Dubin Market or was it going to be from Qarabağ Meat Market? Those were our Armenian ASA problems, right? And then all of a sudden one day we were told by our instructors, and at the time we had another brilliant Armenian professor there, Stepan Asturian, who's now at Berkeley, who was a friend and mentor. Him and Hovhannisyan separately, they called us in and they're like, look, we have a problem. We
need to stop this.
We have the Turkish Republic. We had Stanford Shah, who was a very notable and notorious Armenian genocide denier, one of the people in Ottoman Turkish studies who was at UCLA. He was going to retire, and his parting legacy from UCLA was to solidify his versions of history by ensuring that someone who shared his views succeeded him. And that was when the Republic of Turkey offered this money to the university. And it wasn't that, and I've said this publicly, I said it in newspaper interviews at the time, I said, my issue wasn't with the fact that it was going to be an Ottoman Turkish, because look, the study of Ottoman history, if you're studying it, you're studying also the
Armenian
lives
history.
of Armenians
Yeah,
or anyone in the Balkans or any of the Arab people that were subjects. The Ottoman Empire was an empire.
Yeah.
But what this chair was doing was putting restrictions on it. It was the holder of the chair had to be approved by a committee, which the Turkish consulate had a representative on with absolute veto power. It had to be an academic who had friendly relations with academic circles within Turkey. This is during time of Section 301, which criminalized mention of the genocide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Needless to say, there were so many strings attached to this thing. It looked like a Turkish-controlled, marionette puppet.
It was going to be a propaganda machine for them. Yeah, no, and
Precisely.
that's awesome, and I love that was like a catalyst for you. And I mean, as youth that we've been in AYF our whole lives and going to protests, I mean, this is a lot of us might have those experiences as well, where But
here's where the most important thing for AYFers and anyone who's a young activist listening to take away from this story, because it is now kind of history. I think back, we were talking before we started recording, and some things we were talking about, I'm like, man, that was like 20 years ago, right? I'm old. But at that time, no one thought we would ever be able to successfully stop that chair.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, we were a group of ragtag student activists. Like I said, we had, Armenian ASA problems. Like, it was like our concerns were totally distanced and far. Our minds were the furthest thing away from getting politically active and loud on campus. And, we went to a couple of organizations. We tried to seek their help. We needed advice. We had never done this before. And most of them said, why do you guys want to fight this? We found out about it. It's too late. It's a done deal. Worry about the next time. Like, how are you going to withstand, like, the massive Turkish lobby? $1.5 million is a ton of money. Like, how's the university? Like, people equivocated and they rationalized their inaction.
Yeah.
Right? Which you see a lot of. They justified it and rationalized it in the same way many people are doing now.
Yeah.
And, it came to this moment where I was like, Braveheart, I think, was a popular movie back then, right? And you start thinking about, like, some of the one of the lines in Braveheart about sitting, in old age and wondering what you did back then. And, I thought to myself, if I'm older and my kid turns to me and sees that there's this Turkish chair at UCLA that's putting out all sorts of denialist crap and says, hey, Pops, what did you do when you were a student there? And I say nothing. And that was when, like, me and my friends, Pedro Zarokian, Vache Petrosyan, shout-outs to them, the Abulians, Arby, Ohani. We were just thinking to ourselves, we said, you know what? Even if we fail, we'll have done something.
Yeah,
our goal was to make their lives, even if they succeeded, we wanted to make it so difficult for them that any other university that was approached by the Turkish government would be like, this is toxic, we don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. This is an issue that is going to, open a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah. Our progress cannot be subject to singular goals, and you went after it, and you tackled it very well.
Yeah.
I always say, like, what type of Armenian are you going to be? If you were Vartanant's battle, you're going up against a 300,000 Persian horde of an army that's 10 times bigger. Are you going to run from battle or fight to the death,
Vartanants is a sore subject with me.
Yeah, we don't talk about
I am not a Vartan Mamigonian fan.
Oh, yeah, that's not for this
episode.
We
can talk about Ardashes.
No. So I'll just tell you this. My 2 cents on it is we worship Vartan Mamigonian, who went on a suicide mission, when we should be praising Kyle Vahan, his nephew, who survived the battle and then carried on decades-long guerrilla warfare against the Persians. Actually, probably the first recorded in history
guerrilla
warfare tactic, to the point where it brought the Persians to their knees and they said, okay, we give up. Worship whoever you want, Christ or whoever, just please don't molest us.
Hey, but how were they able to keep the people going for those 30 years? Well, they had to create a symbol behind his uncle.
Sure.
So both are necessary. Sorry for poking a hole in your thing. I'm kidding.
No, that's totally... Listen, but I appreciate Vartan Mamigonian.
But I agree, though.
He is a saint. It was a great sacrifice. But we should also remember the people who carry on the struggle.
I agree.
Of course.
And we too often don't. We get hung up on this moral victory.
Well, a lot of the times people like the nephew and a lot of us who work in the background, I mean, we're not doing it for the glory at the end of the day, so we could care less about if people remember us or not. We just want to see the outcome be what we want.
Amen.
But I agree, and shout out to Vahan, was it Vahan?
Kyle Vahan, the Wolf Shield. I mean, tell me, like, is there a more badass name than the Wolf Shield?
Ashot Yerkat.
Ashot Yerkat is cool too.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. I like Ashot Yerkat.
Anyways.
We have great folks. Tavit Bey.
Yeah, we have.
Mochitar Spara. Like,
Oh, yeah.
these great nicknames.
Ardashes, we know that you were a key player for the ANCA Gateway program. Can you please talk a little bit about that and how you helped execute that idea?
So, I mean, this again goes back to my time in Washington, D.C. and seeing like how small the contingency was of staffers on the Hill and realizing that if we wanted to actually have real policy and legislative success on the Hill, it wasn't enough just to walk into those buildings as a guest on Lobby or Activist Day, but to have our folks working there, understanding the process and explaining it to us. And there were many people at the time. There was at least half a dozen or so very committed Armenian political staffers. Rafi Hamparyan was actually one of them, working for Congressman Rothman from New Jersey.
Oh, nice.
And I did the internship for the Armenian Assembly because at the time, the ANC internship, you interned for the ANC offices, and I had been offered an internship after the success we had at UCLA of blocking the acceptance of the chair.
Good on your resume, huh?
Yeah, well, so, one thing I didn't mention is that the way that chair was blocked is, first of all, we did a lot of activism, wrote articles, held protests, crashed, flash mobbed at various town halls,
Nice.
and the actual vote, whether to accept that, came down to a vote from within the history department of the faculty. And it was a closed-door meeting. It was a rainy day. It was I want to say December 17th, if I remember correctly. And campus was closed, but this meeting was happening. We went down there, just 3 or 4 of us. We were waiting the whole time. We didn't know what was going on. And then Professor Ovanesian came out of the room, called us into his office. We went in, and he's like, well, by a vote of 18-17, the department has voted to reject the offer from the Republic of Turkey. And we were like, one vote? Really? It was that close? Like, imagine if one person had woken up that morning with a poratsav, or pork and did not come to that, meeting. We would have been toast. And so, realizing at that moment that being there, being on the field, matters. Right, yeah. Showing up matters. And so after that, when Frank Pallone, Congressman Pallone from New Jersey, I was at a meeting that someone had set up. I think it was folks from the assembly, and I was introduced to him, and they explained to him what I did. He's like, hey, come to Washington, D.C. I want you to intern for me. And I didn't have any money. I didn't have, the resources. It was going to be time away from family. I was kind of on the fence, and a friend told me, when a congressman personally offers you an internship, you don't be stupid about it. You just take the internship. We'll figure out a way.
Live on the streets, you got to do it.
Yeah, so I kind of did. I took some time off of UCLA. I saved up money. I worked 2 jobs. I made enough money to be able to live for 2 months in Washington, D.C., and I did that. Wow. And that's when I saw that we didn't have enough Armenians working there. So that was constantly on my mind. And came back here to L.A., which was surreal. We had in Washington, D.C., real issues related to Hayastan, related to Artsakh. And you come back here and, Hollywood and L.A. can be somewhat superficial when you look at the bigger problems that are going on in L.A. The Oscars are one of the biggest things that happen here in L.A. In D.C., no one cares about the Oscars, right? It's about the next, budget cycle or, the press conference that's going to happen at the Pentagon or the White House. And I put my mind to, we need to get organized here. We need to get organized and active. And that's when I realized, I started talking to folks as to, I went back the following year. I worked in Washington, D.C. 2 successive summers and a spring. And it was, I came back with this mission that we need to get organized, we need to get active, and we need to get more Armenians to D.C., however it takes. If we, my mindset was if we can cycle through every year about 30 or 40 or 50 Armenians who are exposed to the process, who also come out of that cave and see that light, and they come back and they inform more people, then we will get to a point where we have enough folks who understand the process, understand the system, and we train this army of activists that can make real change.
And I have to say, Ardashes, having many friends who've done the program, and even if it's another program, they've done this DC thing, and a lot of them have stayed, a lot of them love it, a lot of them have gone back home and become active. So that was an amazing contribution and idea, and I'm really happy we have that opportunity now. Like, if anyone's listening, if you're interested in working in DC, the ANCA has a Capital Gateway program where they can house you for, I think, free for a few months, and they'll help you network and get a job and internship, and especially if you want to work on the Hill, that's what they love.
So Rafi Hamparian, Steve Dedeyan, who were active in the ANC in the Western region at the time, who I consider great friends and mentors, along with people like Alex Sardar and Viken Sonins-Papazian. They've been great friends and people I've interacted with. I can't forget the two greatest influences in my life as far as Armenian activism and just awareness are my parents, right? So my grandfather, my father's father, was someone who studied in Paris. My dad always told me the story of in Paris when he went to the L'École Centrale, which was one of their top architecture schools. He lived in a dormitory in Paris called Maison Armenienne, the Armenian house.
Nice.
And it was a dormitory, and I don't know who built it, but it's still there today.
I have like 3 friends that are there right now.
At Maison Armenienne?
It must be because they're all they're academics and they're all living in the Armenian house.
So if you look at pictures of this online, it has beautiful Armenian accents on the architecture. It has nours and rucharos and peacocks. And it's an old building. It's been there, I think, since the turn of the last century. And it was designed as a dormitory for Armenian students from around the world who were going to come to Paris to study at some of the top universities in the globe, right? And it didn't matter if you were Hunchak, Tashna, Gram-Gavar. If you were an Armenian and you were in Paris, this was a place where you could live, meet other Armenians, maybe meet a future spouse, right? Have arguments, but have parties as well. And it became this incubator for Armenian intellectual entrepreneurship.
I love it.
Nice.
And so he told me this idea, and I'm like, why do we not have this? I mean, the main challenge we had of getting people to DC at the time, this was, by the way, a totally different era than the one that your listeners are listening to. This was a time when if you were an Armenian living in Glendale and you got into UC Riverside, you didn't move to Riverside. You commuted to Riverside or to Irvine, by the way.
That was me.
Yeah. And so, because Armenian kids were banned from moving out. Even UC, you're from Glendale, but you live in a dorm in UCLA. What's wrong with you, right? You had to drive. So, drive and suffer like your ancestors suffered on the 405. And so, when we would talk, I would talk to parents because I had the opportunity to interact and with Armenian parents or even kids. I'd be like, why won't you go to Washington, D.C. or New York for an internship? And they're like, because, the parents would be like, my kid will become lost.
We'll die.
He will come back with 12 piercings, a forehead tattoo, married to a non-Armenian, and they're going to be lost. It was if they there's this, and it's probably some sort of survival thing, right, from the trauma that's been passed on. So the alternate to that was okay, what if they're living with Armenians? What if we create opportunities for them to meet other Armenians? Right?
Now we can give it a thought.
Yeah, they could meet someone.
And that was the birth between Maison Armenienne and that concept and those conversations I had was the birth of the idea of the Capital Gateway program.
So were you executive director of the ANCA Western region at one point, right?
I was the government relations director for many years, and we didn't have an executive director.
Oh yeah.
So I was the executive director. I was the custodian. I was the treasurer. I wore many hats, and then eventually my title officially was promoted to executive director.
This was after your experience in DC, right? And you came back and you're involved in that. I mean, other than the did we talk about the main issues? What were some of the main issues you're working on at that point? I guess more briefly. But what
with
was
Haidat.
Yeah, what was going on?
It was a lot of the same stuff. Obviously, we're in a different. Now is a very unique time, but it was Artsakh, recognition of Artsakh, aid to Artsakh, continuing foreign aid to Armenia because Armenia had was still struggling in a post-Soviet world economy space. Raising awareness about Section 907, the Freedom Support Act, which put restrictions on countries that blockaded the transfer of humanitarian aid to Armenia,
right?
Which we've heard some stuff about of late. It was revived. Bolstering that, protecting that. Those were all things that we were active in, and it was post 9/11 too. So there was a lot of questions about where Armenia was, convincing people that Armenia was at the forefront of the fight against some of this fundamentalist, violent terrorism that was rocking that part of the world.
Yeah.
True. We have given, more Armenians have died in that fight. I mean, especially if you consider the genocide, right? I mean, one of the lines that we would use with some of the more conservative congressmen in Washington, D.C., who, claim to be proponents of Christian values, we'd say, look, Armenians that's the only genocide in history where people were killed for being Christian. Right? So if you're claiming to be a person who's standing up for Christian values, how can you be also denying or aiding those who deny that genocide?
Yeah. I do see that angle right now with ANC trying to work with in defense of Christians, but especially after this Artsakh war, I really feel like a lot of this talk about it, whether it's people talking about Christian values or human rights in this, I mean, to me, it's all words now. It's I don't see the action behind any of it. So
but you're not going to see it.
But you're still going to play the game. You're still going to try your best to get these people on your side and assist Armenia.
The last 2 years, I think, have been the loneliest for me, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners. As an Armenian-American, I've never felt more alone in my life on this planet. Even though I know there are other Armenians who share my emotions, there were times during the months of that war, and even today, where you're just floating, you're just existing, you're taking in oxygen, but you don't feel like...
I didn't feel like present wherever I was, whether I was at work or wherever. I think that's what you're getting at. It's like I didn't...
I definitely understand how you have been feeling this past 2 years, because I've been feeling the same way. I was a true believer in United Nations mission, and I still partially do. But after seeing what was happening in Armenia, and after seeing that UN was not taking any preventative measures or was not getting involved whatsoever, that really made me question a lot of things. And even I was part of a United Nations Association chapter here in Pasadena, but now I'm like, what am I being a part of if in time of crisis they're not willing to help, and they're not willing to uphold the human rights that they're always talking about.
No, same.
I agree.
No, I lost a lot of faith too. I was working in human rights stuff, and why are we trying to?
And it's not only, unfortunately, it's not only UN. It's also...
It's all of it. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, they put out an article which is already like kind of both sides. But anyways, it doesn't matter. The work continues. We're not going to, we're going to be the
unfortunately, it does matter. But I guess as Armenians, we have to grow so strong that we won't rely at some point on anyone else's help.
Exactly. So
there is, you
have to be very committed. To the point where other people will think your commitment is equal to being somewhat imbalanced in the head, right? I mean, I'll give you one example, right? And I say this to a lot of folks about the ARF and what people who were committed to the ideals of the ARF kind of believed and stood for. So for those, nowadays it's interesting because everyone is like this overnight political expert and has a lot to say about a lot of things, right? And what's unfortunate to me, and I've made a few comments about this online, and I try not to delve too much into it because I also don't want to criticize people who have become more interested and more active in the world of politics, geopolitics, and Armenian politics specifically. But you do need to read history. Like history and political science and political analysis go hand in hand because, first of all, history reverberates. It's repeated multiple times. And if it's not in Armenia, you look at other examples, there's always parallels to draw on.
It's like a blueprint of like what to do and what there is.
But even within our own history, even if you go back to the 19th century, 18th century, you look at even the Qarabağ, Artsakh, specifically what was happening in those areas, a lot of similarities in Sunik, and the struggles to secure the security and independence of the people in those areas.
Do you mean like David Beck and those stories? And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's history, but I'll even take it to, like, I'm going to take it one step further and say, look, in 1988, actually 1987, let's go 87, 86, if you ask any political expert anyone who has all the PhDs, all the titles, who, you know, if it was today, they would have podcasts and they would have like YouTube videos, and ask them, how much longer is the Soviet Union going to be in existence?
Yeah.
They're like, what do you mean? It's going to be in existence for
Forever.
a long time. It will be, you know, or maybe a more cynical person would say 50 years, right? Another half century until we can win the Cold War.
It was the second biggest empire in the world at that time.
And what happened between 87 to 89? From 89 to 90, there was no Soviet Union anymore.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, if at that time in the U.S. you had people who were, you know, proponents of an Angah Azad Hayastan, you had a lot of Armenians who were like, no, listen, Soviet Armenia is what we got. That's what we got to support. Like, Kesh Gam Lav, Sovietagan Gam Voch, like Mer Hayanik. Which I get that view as well. But the people that were like jojeling like Yera queens like at rallies were seen as insane.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yet it was because of that radicalism, or that idealism, I would rather say, that when the vacuum occurred, when the Soviet Union collapsed and there was no safety net, Armenia was abandoned, it was those people who had the vision of an independent Armenia who were ready to step into those roles, who were able to go and fight in the First Artsakh War and pick up the slack for people. You know, and it's a reminder. I mean, we have the words in our own poems, right? In the song of Sadarabad, in the poem, it says like Yev chimunum yel kujar chentern and gutnum hanar. Like when there's no other way, it's the crazy ones that find the way.
Great quote.
And so, like, you know, we need more chens nowadays. We need more people who are like, this is an unacceptable situation.
The dreamers and the people that believe in the impossible. But no, well, what I wanted to actually say earlier when you were talking about some of the things that ANC was working on, I mean, I remember going to protests as a kid and for the Armenian genocide recognition, and I remember people would be like, it's never going to happen, just give up on it. Like, why are you going to go? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I mean, we stayed consistent. We didn't give up on it. And I mean, they recognized it finally all these years later, and it's frustrating to have to wait so long and do all that work for it. But I mean, I remember at one point they were saying, don't even bother. And I mean, but then we eventually, you know, succeeded.
The truth always will win.
Yeah.
If you are committed to keeping it alive. If you start, again, rationalizing, equivocating, and coming up with, you know, more convenient positions, that's when you lose. But the truth, and especially historical facts, matter, and they're non-negotiable. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that every day. And I think right now we're living in a space where, first of all, unfortunately, for whatever reason, there's a lot of people who are ready to criticize their own nation, their own people, and their own community within. I mean, this goes back even a few years, you know, just saying, like, Armenia should do this better, or Armenia should be doing that. And I'm like, you know what? Like,
unless they're involved.
We played this democracy game. We tried to be, like, Western, and what did it get Armenia?
Yeah.
Like, you know, what has it gone to the survival of this small nation tribe? Like, go peddle that stuff on Baku and Azerbaijan. Like, you want democracy? You want, like, you know, the westernization of a society? Peddle it to that petro dictatorship across the border. Like, Hayon Hankis, like, we're barely surviving with what we have. There was, by the way, a great... So, Markar Melkonian, who's Monte Melkonian's brother, he gave a talk about his book, My Brother's Road, here in Glendale once. And what he said, like, you know, we kind of mythologize about Monte, and we have to remember, at the end of the day, he was a human, right? He was a very extraordinary human, but he was still a person, right? With his flaws and, you know, good points and bad points. But he said the one thing about his brother that was, like, so stark and different than the average person at that time. And when you read, like, what his life experience was, it reflects that, is that a lot of us say things and it's just lip service. Like, we'll say, like, oh, I'm an environmentalist, or I'm a vegan, or I'm this, but like, do you truly, like, is that what your life is every day? Or do you find ways to cut corners on that? Like, Monte, when he said things, he believed it and he did it and he was committed to it.
He was a doer.
Yeah. More than he truly believed it. Like, we know the stories, right? That he totally banned, like, alcohol among his troops. He, you know, was like he lived cleanly, madzun and like exercise and all these things that, like, you know, I mean, there's a lot of, again, nowadays, like, social media, like, warriors and all these folks, but, like, we need to like just be more self-disciplined, self-aware, and live the ideals that we espouse. And I'm guilty of it myself. Listen, I'm a lazy Omega.
Easier said than done, but no, you're right. And I think that's actually why a lot of people follow or naturally followed people like Monte or Garagi Nujda or whatever, because these guys were people that walk the talk. They were not just talking, and I think that's when Armenians are more receptive to, and they'll actually listen. Everyone's always talking, everyone's always giving their opinion, but the second they'll actually, actually follow or believe in somebody's when they see them in action.
But all those people you mentioned, by the way, all the people that we aspire to be like, or we think are, people that have helped the survival of the Armenian nation. I mean, one can argue that we brought them down ourselves, right? Yeah. Or that, there was some turn of events where we could have had their back and we didn't.
Yeah.
So that's also a part of our, like, what we need to do within our Armenian community. If this is like a moment of Ardashes' rules, like, we need to do a SWOT analysis of ourselves. If you guys know what a SWOT analysis is
strengths, weaknesses,
opportunities, threats, right? So, like, we need to look at the Armenian community, we need to look at ourselves and say, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Where are the opportunities? And what are our threats? And if we do that in an honest way,
I think we'll have a very long list.
Yeah, definitely. But that's actually, I know we're like talking about Monte a little bit here, and but he wrote a book, Self-Criticism, where they compiled a lot of his memoirs that were talking about him criticizing his own actions and his own past, and only until he criticized himself and nitpicked at all the things he did wrong did he actually do what he was all about from the beginning, is go and liberate Armenian homeland and do that. So he went to jail in the 80s. He wrote this self-criticism, and when he got out, he actually did what he wanted. So I really think the self-criticism on all our parts, all our organizations, all our friends, and this is huge, but it's hard for Armenians to do that. We have a lot of pride. We're very stubborn, and we're
very prideful.
We'd rather ruin.
So I will offer you guys a very interesting exercise to you and all your listeners to help you to start on that path.
Yeah, we'll just keep going with this. Okay. I'm thinking we might turn this into like Ardy's advice, or I don't even know.
No. Listen, I'm far from no one should be taking advice, but I will say this. These are things that have worked for me or are in the process of working. Right? Things
we want to hear it then.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
As morbid as this sounds, as dark as this sounds, is write out your own eulogy.
What do you want it to
write out your own obituary. Like, imagine like you die, God forbid, today. What are people going to say? What do you want people to remember you for? Right? And I say that, and it's like, when you say that, like, you can think about it, but if you ever go and read obituaries in the paper, which I sometimes do, right? And whether it's Armenian newspapers or others, like, write your own, and you'll realize how frivolous our lives are, and how little we actually commit to those things that we rally around when the time is right. I mean, look, remember how many people had Artsakh flags during the months of the war?
Yeah.
And like all that energy, and where is it now? Like dumped into like driving exotic cars and posting photos on Instagram again. I mean, we just defaulted back to where we were.
What they were before, what they were doing before.
And like,
I had a first-hand experience with that during the war. I was trying to start this group, a detachment group, and our goal was to later on move to Armenia. I don't know if you have heard about Voma in Armenia.
Yes.
It's called Ողջ մնալու արվեստը. So they're basically training volunteers who want to join the army. So I started something similar here, and Anger Mihran from ARF was helping us. He was training us. We were a group of 5 girls. At the beginning of the war, I had 25 girls signed up.
Oh, no way.
In the middle, we were around 10, and then when the war ended, 5 of the girls were like, "Oh, the war is done. Yeah. Like, what's the point of this?"
It's not done.
Well, I remember seeing all these posts during the war of like, "I'm going to marry an Armenian, and I'm going to have Armenian babies, and I'm going to have 10 of them."
I'm going to have
like, it's been more than 9 months since
where should have at least one ready.
Where are all these babies? But
no, hey, look, I remember feeling like, hey, look, now everyone's talking about it. This is great. I almost feel like, because I've always been, as an AYF member, we've been going to these Artsakh protests like the whole time. Not when it was quote unquote trendy, for lack of a better term, but I was all excited because I was like, okay, the pressure's off my shoulders a little bit. Everyone's active, everyone's getting into it. And granted, I'll say there is probably like more of a residue left over where there are a lot more people now talking about it, doing things about it, but it did die down a little bit. And
but even the people talking about it right now also are struggling emotionally and with depression.
Yes.
I think those of us who've always been active, it's funny, like, not funny. I mean, I know we're laughing and we're kind of having a good time because I'm really enjoying the conversation and your company, but, you know, I mean, I think that your listeners shouldn't mistake our comfort in having this conversation for us not taking the issues seriously enough. We just can't be 100% serious. I mean, I deal with grief differently. I use sometimes humor as a defense mechanism as well. It's part of, I think, my personality and nature. But, you know, we have to seriously acknowledge the burnout that a lot of activists are feeling. And I remember during the wars, I was constantly on the defensive because, like, all these people had become activated. I remember hearing a few times, well, where has Haitat been? Or where has ANC? And I'd be like, where have you been? Like, I mean, while we were in the trenches, literally the political trenches in Sacramento, Washington, D.C., Washington State, Nevada, you name it, Texas, you know, which now there's all this attention on Texas and the Azeri scandal. And, like, I could, you know, back in the day, like 20 years ago, that was a hotbed of Azeri activity because of the oil industry in Houston. Like, no one would help us. Like, you couldn't drag people to go to an ANC event, talk, whatever the case may be. And I'm glad people are active now, but then to dismiss the work that was done, the people that were, I mean, the Haitat activists in America, the AYF activists are the political equivalent. I'm not drawing a direct parallel because the sacrifice our soldiers make on the borders is totally on a completely different level. But on a political level, it's no different than that kid who's alone in a trench in the snow with, like, not even the proper gear, right? Like, our lobbyists, our quote-unquote lobbyists, who are really Armenian activists in Washington, D.C., are the American political equivalent of that. The work that they do with the resources they have is nothing short of miraculous.
Up against, you know, the lobbyist version of drones, or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely,
you know?
100%.
You know, well, for example, Ardashes, we have in LA like 6 months ago, a year ago, there was like a mayor and a police department that did something with the Azeri consulate, and we put pressure on them, or it was like the San Diego City Mayor, that's what it was,
and the sheriff of LA.
And the sheriff Torrance or some LA or something. We put pressure on them. They put out a statement saying, you know, oh, we didn't know, or this and that. But I feel like there was something missing there. Like, we should have capitalized. We should have done something more to, like, you know, then have an opportunity to educate them, an opportunity to make them then do something in addition to make up for it, rather than just saying, hey, this is a win and we'll move on now, right? Are there other? How would you like? Do you have any recommendations on how we can be more efficient, or I don't know if that's the right word? Keep our progress or maintain our progress and then add to it.
So I think one of the things we need to do is expand our circles of influence, right? And not necessarily engage people in a way where we're only telling our story, but to also listen to the story that other people have to tell and relate to it. So when the issue happened at UCLA, by the way, and I'm talking, you know, when we go back to the Turkish chair issue at UCLA, and by the way, shout out to any UCLA ASA listeners that you have, and if you don't, hopefully more will start listening after this.
For sure.
But, you know, a lot of the problems that we were facing, or we are facing today in terms of being fractured, different people doing different things, some people not wanting to follow certain, you know, leadership and saying like, hey, you know, you're on your own. All those things, you know, that happened then, happened today, very little change. But one of the things that I think we did that was very unique and has been done since and has been built upon and has translated to a lot of success, particularly with the AYF, ASA, the divestment issue, was it started back in my day when we started coalition building. We knew we were too small of a group within the larger UCLA student family. And our voice was very small, just as Armenia's is, right? So what we did is we started building relationships. In fact, Vace Petrosian, who was my ASA vice president in our term, was very good at this. He lived in the International Student Dormitory House. So he was very good at talking to people about their country, about origin and culture and whatever.
Nice.
We built alliances with the MECHA, Movement Estudianto Chicano de Aslan, which was a very active group of Latino, Latinx students. We built coalitions with the Persian Student Association.
Nice.
We built coalitions with the Hellenic-American Student Organization, the Greek students. And we had allies. And together we became, when the Turkish students got wind that we were becoming active and informing others of this effort to whitewash Turkish crimes through this establishment of this chair, we had a number of allies. So when there was an opportunity, when they got up to speak and complain and talk about Armenian, whatever it was, terrorism, this, that, we had 3 other non-Armenians, not Armenians, but non-Armenians who got up and responded. And when a non-Armenian speaks out on these issues, they become also more a reliable or trusted source of information within their circles, right? Think about that. I mean, when a non-Armenian comes within Armenian circles with some information, some people will listen, but if an Armenian carries that same information, they become a validator, and they become more trusted. I mean, it's like this in a lot of communities.
It's true.
Yeah.
And so we need to build those relationships. We need to continue reaching out and finding out. That's why we need to start working with, like, for instance, on the political right, we need to find allies within those Christian coalition groups. On the left, we need to build those alliances within the human rights groups, which we've started. But then not just make it about ourselves, but say, okay, what are your issues? Well, this is like, you help us, we help you. There's intersectionality. And I know that this may not be popular because some people are like, well, they're never really going to help us,
We tried actually during the war, AYF, we had a council, and what we were doing, we were searching all the phone numbers from different churches or different Christian organizations, and we were reaching out to them and letting them know that this is happening in Armenia, a Muslim country is attacking Christian Armenia, and we were trying to see if anyone would respond or if anyone...
Well, but I mean, I think the problem with that at the time was that we started too late.
Yeah,
definitely. Yes,
and that's
unfortunately.
We are generally very reactionary as a community, which is the problem that we're seeing now, or we're seeing with this aftermath of the war and like the community kind of slowing down. Well, so for example, based on what you were saying, Ardashes, like if I was an Armenian who cared about something that was not an Armenian issue, like let's say environmental science or eco-friendly things, get out of my Armenian bubble and go and get involved in these other policy issues, get influential there, and then you can, go and say, hey, Azerbaijan is this big oil fossil fuel kind of country. Let's put pressure on the government on an eco kind of lobbyist side of things. Like, is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yes, I do think that part of it is, you look at how we can become more involved and bring about change. And look, public service shouldn't always just be about what is important for us, right? Public service is about how do we serve the greater community. I always believe if you do your job and you do it well, there's recognition for it, and people will want you to do more. I mean, think about within the AYF and the AYF chapters. Who do you give the assignment to? You don't give it to the person you may try to give it to the person who never does anything, never shows up. After about 1 or 2 times, you realize it's not going to happen. So you give it to the person who actually shows up, who cares, who shows interest, right?
Are you sure you weren't in AYF at all? You know pretty well.
No, because here's the thing. These things are universal.
Yeah,
they're the same
everywhere.
for any organization, right? I mean,
exactly.
I think someone was telling me recently that Hovhannes Tumanyan had written an essay in which he said it's only 4% of the Armenian community that is doing anything to lead and keep the Armenian spirit alive.
Still low-key kind of feels true.
Right? And he wrote this like in the 1890s or whatever, or 1800s, and like you're like, okay, like so it's the same. And I'll even take it one step further. You can, all the things you criticize about the Armenian community today, go back and read Moses Hoyanatzi's like last chapter of his History of the Armenian People. It's called the Lamentation or Lamenting Over Armenia. And you can find the English translation. I wrote it. I found the translation. I sent it to someone who was critical of the Armenians today and was very down and dour about what was happening in Hayastan. Not with this administration, but the previous one, although this administration is, I think, as deserving, if not more deserving of our criticism, far more deserving. And I said, look, like, we have to look at where, look at our past to understand and carve a way forward for the future. And when you read Moses Marnatz, you're like, man, it's all the same. Like all the complaints we have are the same.
Yeah.
So how do we succeed and how do we move forward in spite of ourselves? Despite ourselves, despite our weaknesses. And so I think one of the ways is to expand our horizons, to be more involved in what's around us immediately. If your own house is not in order, don't go around trying to tell other people how to fix their houses. Be healthy and be a constant learner. Take care of your health. For everyone who's listening, for anyone who's listening right now, having a cigarette, put out that cigarette. For anyone who's going to go out and drink with their friends this weekend, think twice. Treat your body like a temple. Armenia needs every single one of you in peak health.
Yes.
Treat this like you would treat a video game. Our goal is to get to the next level.
Yeah.
All of us need to advance in this game and get to the next level and one up. And arm up and
a healthy body, healthy mind. I completely
Let's make Hovannes Tumanians 4% to 10, then 20, then 30.
Yeah.
And then we have this saying, right? It says "Us usi vortang, sare shurkatank." I'm not sure if I can translate that in Armenian,
shoulder
but I guess
to shoulder, we can topple mountains.
Yes. So it's
how's that for a little Omega high? Huh?
Very good Armenian. Very good.
That was amazing. But it's so unfortunate to think only 4% of us are.
Hey, I mean, but that being said, I listened to a podcast about revolutions and we're learning about the Bolshevik Revolution right now, and I mean, it was really at the end of the day like a few hundred of these guys who just at the right time at the right place were able to change history. So I mean, that 4 or 5% can do crazy things. I think
our history has proved that.
But when you are successful, what the saying is that success has many parents, but failure is an orphan. Like once you are successful, everyone will want to take part in that success. One of the things that I take pride in is that the work that I did at the ANC and that my predecessors, I've stood on the shoulders of giants, right? Like people like Viken Sonens and Alex Sardar and the executive directors who came before them, people like Berj Karapetyan. There's a lot of folks, and the Hamparian brothers, and so there's a lot of folks, and we are able to see further when we're able to do that. When we build on that knowledge, we continue that tribal memory of what has happened. Right. But then also, when you're successful, you're going to have a lot more people who want to be involved. Not all of them will be up to par. And the goal isn't to then take those people who are maybe not up to the challenge and say, you know what, you don't have anything to contribute, get lost. But rather to find ways where they can contribute and be successful. Armenians are a very small tribe. There isn't too many of us, and we need an all-hands-on-deck situation. Right. Even the people that we may politically disagree with, maybe they have a different political ideology. I like I'm a UCLA guy, so I like John Wooden, the Wizard of Westwood. And one of the things that made all of his basketball teams successful was that he always found a way to put his players in positions to set them up for success. So what that means is if you have a player who's not very tall, for anyone who follows basketball or knows anything about basketball, you don't take your shortest player is not going to be your power forward, right? You're going to make him probably your point guard or something. You don't put them in a position where they're going to not score and be a failure. You want to make people successful. And that's what I think as Armenians we don't do often. We see people fail and then we dismiss them immediately versus saying maybe that wasn't the best thing that person was intended to do. Yeah. Maybe there's another role for them. But every Armenian has value.
I agree. Right. Even the Armenian that's fourth generation, quarter Armenian, doesn't speak Armenian.
Are you talking about yourself?
No, because I really think no, but a lot of my cousins, who are really down when the war happened, before and after, they all really want to be involved and help and this and that. They want to learn Armenian. They're taking classes. They've done Birthright, so they are really trying to do this thing. Hell yeah! Nice. So I have a lot of family who are desiring to get involved, but then a lot of times the community could be very exclusive and not welcoming at times because they don't know who you are.
Let me validate that point. I can tell you that some of my friends from AYF who were not born and raised in Armenia were more involved and have done more for Armenia than, unfortunately, some people I know who were born and raised in Armenia.
Right. Like, I can tell you, like, I know plenty of half Armenians that, have, go move back to Armenia and do the whole thing, and so we can't really talk big. But the point I was getting at is we need to create an inclusive community on top of it to then utilize and maximize on those community members that we can find their strength and we can optimize, and we can, our diversity will be our strength in that way. And we're not going to know what options we have until we, have them all in the room together. Say you'd be good at this and you'll be good at that.
We often we often mythologize success stories. Like, one of the things we need to do is, again, read these stories of entrepreneurial success. Like, when we talk about whether it's Microsoft or Apple, like, there's this kind of image of someone in a garage, and then, there was this moment where a light comes on. We look at narratives in a very Hollywood way, right? And and instead we got to realize that success is often complicated. There's various pathways to it, and it can look different to different people. One of our problems in Hayastan is I think we constantly are looking towards an individual to lead our people, because we've been led to think there was Ardashes, and then there was Dikan Meds, or there was Hagnahabed, or Sasunsi David. And instead, you take the revolutionary movement, certain people came out of the revolutionary movement, whether it's Antrani Guzunian, Antrani Pasha, or, the Kayakin Nijdes, or the Sose. But of what made that movement successful, or as successful as it was in terms of an awakening of the Armenian consciousness, was the fact, first of all, was ideas. Ideas are what gave birth to that, this consciousness that I think sometimes is lacking. And then the other is that enough people, you look at all those photos of these people, they're not sitting there on a chair alone. They're usually with like 15 or 20 guys all wearing their purte papachs, and they're carrying their rifles with their bandoliers. Yeah. I can't name half of them. We know Antranik, and we have songs about them, but Antranik wouldn't have been Antranik if he didn't have like 20, 30 guys with him.
No, and that's why I feel like I'm happy to be involved in organizations like the AYF that like sometimes can get frustrating working with Armenians. Doesn't feel like it almost doesn't feel natural at times. Very frustrating experience. But I'm like, if the goals that I have are big goals. I want Armenia to have justice. I want this and that, and we're going up against nations and armies. I'm not. No matter how rich an individual is, I don't think they're going to be able to move mountains that way. You really need to be part of a greater collective of workers,
dedicated
and
individuals
working together.
See, even in our history, like the men we had, our fedais, they were amazing, but some of them had their wives with them. Akhir set up and Sosa Mighty.
Yes. With preach. I love that. Yes. Everyone. And not just to, we now live in this era where, like, I want to say you can be anything you want, right? You can achieve whatever you want within reason. Like, I'm not going to run a marathon any day. But maybe, I don't know. But I'm not going to win a marathon. I may be able to run.
Body, healthy mind, bro.
Listen, I know New Year's resolutions. But, we need to encourage. We all need each other to lift each other up.
Yes.
We all need to lift each other up. And when we see someone struggling, to help them, because, it's that Partsatsur, you have Partsatsur.
Yes.
Like, it's going to be lonely at the top if you're only after your own goals. Like, our goals need to be collective. We need to do it with a collective mind. And when you reach the top, like, you need to see, like, who else can you carry your friends up with you?
I think that's from a famous Armenian poem.
Bahan Tekian.
Yeah, it is a Tekian. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to say. Like, a lot of times, like, people will say, well, when I would be asked, like, okay, what is the advantage of doing, like, one of the ANC's internships or doing any of these Armenian internships, right? And Divine, would you mind snapping, like, a couple of photos of it?
Take some shots of this for sure.
So when people would ask me, like, why should I go and intern for the Armenian cause or intern for an Armenian organization, I would say the following, right? Like, I would say, I'm going to bring up the marathon and use that as an example, and this is what I would explain. The marathon every year, in whether it's the Olympics or the marathons around the world, is usually won by someone from, like, either Morocco or Kenya. Kenyans are very, very successful at winning marathons. And if I was to ask you, like, which country has better, like, technology and training athletes, taking care of athletes, is it the U.S. or England or France or Kenya, most people are going to say, and accurately, that it's the U.S., right? We have these athletic facilities where we train athletes who look at basketball or whatever. Is it because we don't train marathon runners? Not at all. We have that ability. But here's what makes them stand out. The Kenyan marathon runners, early on, when they were running, a lot of these runners from the various different African nations and from that subcontinent that would train at, first of all, high altitudes without like the latest Nike sneaker, right? They would train in very adverse conditions. So the conditions that they were training in to be at the level, like to have the same running time, was so challenging that once they were able to succeed or have any success at that level, and then you put them on a level where, you know, they're at sea level, they're at ocean level, and
they have a nice pair of shoes.
They have a nice pair of shoes.
Nice conditions.
There's, you know, they're less barriers. They blow the competition away. Yeah. And that's what working for an Armenian lobby or fighting for the Armenian cause is about. We have so many things going against us, right? So many challenges. We are the Kenyan marathon runner. So if you can succeed at that level with no resources, with like all these other, you know, lobbies working against you, and you can still crack that nut and make progress, then when we do have the resources, watch out.
Yeah, it's true.
We're going to blow the competition out of the water. Because, first of all, our cause is just. And the truth only needs to succeed once for it to hit its target. This is a David and Goliath fight. And Goliath slayed that giant with just one rock. You got to hit your target just once.
Yeah.
And I think we're also so dedicated to our cause, because I know some of the Turkish lobbying organizations, there are people who are hired by the Turkish government, and like the Azerbaijani soldiers who were fighting during the Artsakh war 2 years ago.
Mercenaries, right?
The mercenaries, they were hired. So the determination or the willingness to really save this land, liberate the land, it's not there, because they're doing it for the money. While we have it in our heart, we know the cause and we know that it's just.
And think about every time, like, do you guys notice this, that every time the Turkish or Azeri lobby does something, it's like a knockoff version of what the Armenian lobby is?
Yeah.
I mean, that tells you something, right? That like we are working in terms of entrepreneurism and activism, we're on a different level. And if all they're doing is mimicking us, then, you know, we will win if we can build that capacity, get more people engaged, involved, marshal our resources in an effective way. I am confident that this is not our last chapter, or even a chapter that, you know, we should be so down on. I mean, we will have success. We will have success. Oh, yes. You look at we've gone through much darker periods in our history,
and the war ain't over. You know, there's many battles. So
we just have to be prepared.
Hey, I mean, like, I don't go into, like, you know, volunteering all these hours with the mindset that, oh, I'm going to see that utopia Armenia that I dream of, right? Like, I'm not expecting this sort of, like, reward, or, like, this sort of, like, oh, we've succeeded and now I can relax. It's just, this is good. I've already gotten everything that I want from being Armenian, the family, the friends, the food, the community. Like, there's nothing else that I could really ask for, you know, so this is us giving back, and it's going to be, we're not going to see that in our lifetimes potentially. You know, we're going to struggle till the end, and I mean, we all got to be content with that. And we, at these protests, we'll be like, Baykar, Minchev Vech, we're going to struggle till the end. I mean, people want to work in these organizations, and it being like the nicest, easiest thing ever, and I'm like, no, this is the struggling part. You know, we're being in a committee with the fellow Armenians and trying to plan something out, that's the struggle too, you know.
Look, during World War II, Armenia lost 300,000 Armenian men.
A huge part of its population.
Entire villages were wiped out of their male population, yet they came out of that during the 50s, 60s, stronger than Armenia ever had been. In terms of science and technology, Armenia was number one in the Soviet Union and produced some of the top scientists in the world. Right? We can come out of that. We'll be able to come out of this. Look at what's happening here right now. We're sitting around whatever we would call this, a podcast table with all this equipment, but like three Armenians of three very different backgrounds having this conversation. If that's not hope for and Davin, by the way, who's sitting in the corner, quiet.
Hello.
But you know, if this is not like a sign of our success and survival, what is?
Yeah. No, I see the signs all the time. So you can't lose hope anyway. So then there's no point. But I did want to ask, so let's say outside of the Armenian cause, are there other, let's say, non-Armenian issues that you care about and you're like active in potentially? It could be work-related or non-work-related.
So, I think the issue I'm most concerned about is raising my son, raising our son to be a good person.
That's true.
A good human being.
That's number one job.
First being an environmentally responsible and aware resident of this planet we call Earth is very important. I think we need to be aware of that. And let's not forget, before the whole war happened in Hayastan, there was great activism about environmental justice.
Amulsar, right?
Yeah, Amulsar and Tehud Forest and all that, and we can't forget that. We cannot forget that the patch of earth that we have is worth protecting and preserving. So that's important to me. Social justice issues as far as, access to voting and people understanding how to vote, where to vote, how government works, why it sometimes doesn't work. Those issues are important to me here in the States as well as around the world as well. But like I said, you have to make sure your own house is order before you start trying to. I don't even believe in exporting your ideas. I just believe you live a good life and you live it and you try to be an example for others in that way. And if they want to follow you, they will. We could have a whole other podcast about Glendale issues and what's going on in the city of Glendale. But
that was the next question we were going to ask.
Oh my gosh. No. You guys don't want to hear that. I don't know if your listeners want to hear that.
I guess we can skip
if
on that one.
If anyone is listening to this and speeding on Glen Oaks, please stop. Or speeding anywhere in Glendale. It is. And I feel like our young Armenian friends are sometimes the most egregious violators.
Unfortunately. Ardashes, what would be your advice to the next generation of Armenians who want to pursue a career in politics?
Find an issue that you care about outside of the realm of obviously international policy, because every Armenian is like international affairs, international policy. I'm going to become the next Amal Clooney or whatever. Find something like that. If you want to really be successful in American politics, find an issue in your own community that you think you can impact, make a change in. Get involved in it, learn about it, become a thought leader, policy expert, find like-minded people to work with, dedicate yourself to that, and then find ways in the public political arena to give a greater voice to those that you're trying to help. And if you can do that, like I said earlier, then you will find a pathway in politics and public service. And for some, it's not always about elected office. You can be someone who works on the staff of a political person and impact, then make a great change. There was a great, Dean Shahinian is someone who's helped a lot of Armenians. Used to work for Senator Sarbanes or Sarbanes from Maryland. A lot of people. I'm forgetting a couple of other folks who've been very instrumental, but you don't have to be in elected office. You shouldn't rule it out either. Start cleaning out your social media posts right now and your Twitter and your Instagram, but don't rule it out. Be smart, but at the same time, if that's all you're interested in doing is like running for office because you think that's how I can tell you that there are a lot of times when I feel very limited in what I can say, what I can do, how I can help people because I'm in elected office versus being a private citizen.
Regular individual.
Right. Well, Ardashes, everything you've done and you are going to do, I mean, we follow you very closely. We're very proud of you. Yeah, we're very thankful and proud of the work you're doing. And
I'm humbled, and I hope I can always live up to that. But more importantly, I'm proud of what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ardashes, and I hope we can continue this conversation. This was awesome. I enjoyed it a lot. So,
Me too. Thank you.
You were listening to Haituk Talks, the official podcast of the AYF West. I'm Haig Minasian.
And I'm Susanna Abrahamian.
And we're just a couple of Armenians
talking in the world.
A couple of Armenians talking in the world.